Hello, everybody. It's really nice to see so many of you here and from many different parts of the university and beyond. It's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Rozhen Mohammed-Amin, that we all just call Rozhen usually for obvious reasons, who has a scholarship that she managed to get from BC, the British Institute for the Study of Iran, to come for 2 months. And we're telling her if she could stay longer, but unfortunately that's the maximum length of the scholarship. Rozhen did her PhD in Canada on using different digital media for interpreting an open-air heritage site. And I realized I didn't introduce myself. Apologies, I'm Maria Economou, and I'm based at Information Studies and also at the Hunterian, half and half, working with the digital side for this part of the job. And I'm also, one of my research projects is Emotive Horizon 2020, working with issues and questions of digital interpretation in museums and storytelling, and whether trying a more emotionally engaging approach works better than a didactic kind of knowledge and facts throwing at visitors, and doing research on that. So it was very nice and fortunate meeting in the middle when Rozhen, who is now working back home at the Sulaimani University at the School of Architecture, but working with a lot of cultural heritage institutions in her country and beyond, heard about our work and asked that if she could use the opportunity and the funding of that scholarship and come and work with us. So it was very interesting from our perspective of having somebody working with different kind of challenges and a lot of heritage that's endangered, and bringing that, but also investigating some of the common questions and not just the differences and the challenges, and having her expertise and perspective. We threw her in the deep because at the moment, Hilary Young, who's the research assistant in the project, we have also Emilia Sosnowska, who was pregnant about to deliver a very different kind of deliverable than the European Union one. So, and we were at the thick of things of doing research in the gallery with our visitors. So Rozhen stepped in and helped really a lot, talking to different people and observing us. And she came with me just the last few days. We came back last night very late from an Emotive project, a workshop in Athens, where we had external people working in evaluation and research, giving us feedback on what we've done so far. It was very cruel on me. I couldn't find a different date for this meeting, that we came back very late and now she has to do this. But apart from our work, she's collaborating with the University of Reading and also at UCL. And I thought it was very useful and interesting. There's many more people who wrote to me that wanted to come from the university and couldn't today because of practical accessibility issues and timetabling clashes. But a lot of people started telling me about work we're doing with Kurdistan and Iran, with education department and other sites, and the Global Challenges Fund. I wasn't even aware, as often in this case. You have to go probably to Kurdistan to discover that the person in the next office in Glasgow is actually doing similar stuff. So I think it's interesting to have a person that helps us connect some of those dots and reach out when it's really useful and interesting, and not just work in our own silos. So I'll stop here because I've said too much, I think, already, and pass on to Rozhen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maria, for this introduction. Thank you very much, everyone. Good afternoon, and really appreciate coming out and coming to this talk today. It has been a really great pleasure and great opportunity for me to come to University of Glasgow, and I appreciate my host and I'm very thankful for Maria, and having working with Maria and Hilary has been a great reward so far. So, in my talk today, I will be talking about endangered heritage and digital technology from preservation and revival point of view. Just before I dive more into this discussion about the relationship between digital technology and cultural heritage, I just like to start with a refresher about what is cultural heritage actually for us. So, aside from every other definition that exists, well, it is irreplaceable links to our past. They are things that we are connecting to. It's things that are helping us, informing our present for building our future in that sense. So when it comes, for example, the Stele of Hammurabi, it tells us about the laws that were ruling the old Babylonian, about the set of values, the set of lifestyle that the people had at the time. The Renaissance dome tells us about the architectural, innovation of the time. So each of these cultural heritage legacies are actually telling us things from past for informing our future. And now, why cultural heritage? Aside from what I just mentioned, there are also other reasons for, to really appreciate cultural heritage, in a sense of that we want to preserve and also revive in our present and future. And that is, cultural heritage helps us understand better. It edutains us, it engages us, and also helps with creating connections. Now, aside from these values and these importance, it also has economic opportunities. It creates economic opportunities at various levels and scopes. Yet, despite this importance and despite this significance that I just mentioned, unfortunately, interaction with cultural heritage sites does not often look like this. Does not often comes with this, delicate, holding and trying to protect it, or look like even things like this. In some part of the world, and in some contexts, it actually, interaction with cultural heritage look like this, or this. And it's sad and it's unfortunate that often these things happen in one of the areas that are having world-class cultural heritage legacies. So, for example, in Mesopotamia, where the cradle of civilization happens, where it's known as a cradle of civilization, with invention in writing, law, and many things of our heritage, what happened is that we are increasingly seeing headlines that are talking about how Iraq's cultural heritage are endangered, and how it has been looted back in 2003, and then how it has been, smashed by ISIS hands. So, and lack of, one thing that I'm not seeing is that actually symbolism, cultural heritage symbolism, and recognizing Iraq from its cultural heritage symbols is actually very limited. So this is a conference that I was attending in June, and interestingly, different, and it was about Middle East, and of course, different Middle Eastern countries were represented in different ways. You see here, Egypt is represented as pyramids, and then with the pharaoh. Yet Iraq has been represented as this, the sword, the Arch of Victory that dates back to the Al-Qadisiyah War between Iraq and Iran. And to be fair to the conference organizers and the graphic designer, I would argue that the chances of having the graphic designer know more about local cultural heritage is more than actually the local themselves. So actually something that is really disappointing is that there is very little cultural heritage awareness by locals when it comes to appreciation and seeing the opportunities that I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation. There are many reasons that we can, I can identify, and it might take days and days to talk about them, but actually some of the very main ones are these things, that most of the museums are very object-centered and less visitor-centered. Interpretation is minimal attention to interpretation and storytelling. So the museum by far are not institutions that are actually raising awareness about cultural heritage, about the importance and how and why people need to protect it. And when you are not engaging with your locals, so then how can you blame them for little awareness and things like that? And then, of course, most of the interpretation in local museums are mostly text-based interpretation, like I said, with minimal thinking of education programs, interactive interpretation, things like that. And I say this when it comes to developing new exhibit. If you talk to any curator in Iraq, so the thing that they are actually mostly concerned about is the size of the cases. So basically, and we know that from museum studies that this is a very old way of thinking about managing and developing an exhibit. So I mean, in that sense, we are lagging behind a lot when it comes to presenting and promoting Iraq's cultural heritage. And then in the age of virtual museums and online museum where many things, happening online and things like that, the Iraqi museums are actually, most of them are actually giving you this much information, basically nothing. So if you type the name of the National Museum of Iraq, which is the biggest museum in Iraq, these are the kind of thing it returns to you, basically nothing. Well, there is a better way, but Sulaimani Museum is doing it better, but aside from just having the collection, it's working more like a database for just recording and showing what we have. And it's considered one of the very best things that has been done so far. And, just to give you an idea about how, what to blame for this little heritage awareness thing when it comes to locals. And then there are little or no signs about contemporary museology and cultural heritage, and this includes vision, planning, and management at all these levels. So then, and of course, with that, then there is also a very limited understanding about learning in museum and visitor diversity and needs, and which is very helpful in the case of engaging with locals. Of course, things like that is barely heard about, where that the more that museums need to move away from, just labels and tags to having more interactive and engaging experiences. And that's why, because the more you engage people, the more they remember the experience. The number of visitors in 2016 and 2017, and just to compare, the context of Iraqi museums and Iraqi Cultural Heritage Institution for you, I just took 2 museums here in UK and compared them to Sulaimani Museum, which is, by the way, is officially doing some, recording about who comes when and where. Otherwise, the other museums don't even track of visitors. So this is what we have. In 2016 and 2017, the number of visitors in the British Museum, and the links are there. If you are interested, I can share these slides with you later. So it says over 6 million annually. The number of the museum visitors of Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum not far from home here is actually 1 million, over 1 million in a year. Well, the number of Sulaimani Museum, which is the second largest archaeology museum in Iraq, is this. It was not even helping me to create the label of it, because it was just basically, showing up 9,000 people a year, just the whole year. And this is thanks to a new program that has been encouraged by UNESCO for kids, for school children. Just recently they started. So most of those visitors are actually school children that are going there because of that program. So I mean, local people go very little, and in fact, none at all. It's mostly foreign delegates who go visit the city, they visit the museum. And of course, there are, like I said, many other factors such as conflict are not also helping. It makes cultural heritage be perceived as a luxury thing. Why will I have to protect this while I have too many pressing other things to worry about? So these are some gruesome facts and things about the cultural heritage state in Iraq, and in those contexts that are in the cultural heritage are endangered. But then there is a silver lining to all of this. So when it comes to 20th century and then 21st century, they did not only introduce ISIS to cultural heritage and terrorism in general, but it also brought and accelerated new ways and mediums for engagement with cultural heritage. And one of those new mediums are digital technologies, not as an end goal, but as a tool, as a way for engaging with cultural heritage. So, and culture, there are different uses for digital technologies within the context of cultural heritage, management, planning, all the sort of things. But one of the main important one is actually for presenting and interpreting cultural heritage and also promoting cultural heritage. So in that sense, there are lots of potentials and opportunities for, trying to use technology for actually preserving and also reviving cultural heritage in those endangered contexts. And that's why, because cultural heritage is more like an iceberg. This is my favorite slide that I tend to use in my speech a lot. It's just because it's like, their appearance, which is the materiality that you see, tells you much, much less than what is actually the stories, the things that are embedded in these legacies. So when you look at it, their appearance is just seeing the tip on an iceberg. So they hold much more, and that's why interpretation and storytelling really matters in the context of cultural heritage. And as this scholar, Simon Thurley, very well articulates this thing, says, interpretation is not only helping, with just understanding cultural heritage, it actually helps with protecting cultural heritage, preserving it. Why? Because the more people understand about a cultural heritage object, about the legacies, the more they value it. And the more they value it, the more they care for it. And the more they care for it and enjoy it, then they want to further understand it. And that's how this whole concept of, they want to protect it because they really enjoy it, they want to learn more about it. So, like I said, so there is this relationship between the more you know, the more you are engaged, the more you are entertained by the cultural heritage, then the more you care for it and the more you preserve it. And of course, from there going to the ever-growing relationship between museums and information and communication technologies that are depicted with these different uses and projects within the museum context. And then, you know, from there, one of the scholars very well articulated this growing relationship between museums and cultural heritage, and that's talk about how, you know, starting from 1950s to 1960s, ICT were mostly out, even though there was one example in Netherlands that was using audio guide, but the rest, it was mostly outside museum premises. But then this has changed eventually, like, you know, going like in 1970s and then in 1980s to 90s, it started to grow. And of course, this, when it shows this, when it says ICT in museum, that's talking about the management side of museum. But then it has moved towards more to gallery in a sense that, and then when this article was published, it was in 2005, the scholars were arguing that it is integrated now with museum exhibit now, and it was like, you know, they were more envisioning that it's going to be more, you know, innate relationship within museum, and actually I think we are already in that state now, in some museums at least. Then, you know, this is just about the conceptual framework, about how actually the museums, the relationship between museum and cultural heritage is growing. But then now, how can digital technology actually help in cultural heritage in general and in the context of endangered cultural heritage specifically? So one of the uses actually for using of digital technology for cultural heritage is actually for virtual documentation and restoration. So, you know, we are growing and we are seeing, you know, a growing number of these projects that are, for example, in this case, you see Phimai Temple in Thailand that has been 3D reconstructed with 3D modeling techniques and different ways. And of course, there are laser scanning, also like those sort of, you know, techniques and technologies that help with actually recreating these buildings in virtual. And then from there, once you have it in digital, then you are, you know, the opportunity is open for gaming, for any other way of interacting and edutainment and learning, of course, educational reasons. I mean, so this is one of the uses. And then there is this project called 3D reconstruction of Acropolis that, you know, recreate and visualize the, you know, the remain of the Acropolis in interesting way. For that can help people, first of all, to revisualize it, and then secondly, from there, then opportunities for learning more about this kind of projects. And then you have a case of, you know, using digital technology for virtual restoration, reconstruction, but instead of actually having this model stay within a computer that you are using for, you know, online gaming or any other uses that are, you have to stay on the computer, there are other uses for, you know, digital technology that you can actually use those reconstruction, virtual like restoration and reconstruction on site. And one of the projects is actually related, is this, the rebirth of Buddha in Bamiyan. So you see that actually the destruction of it by the Taliban in early 2000 did not stop the Buddha statue to come back in even more interesting and engaging way, and this is how it has been, you know, this is a project by using 3D projection with augmented reality, like, you know, location-based augmented reality, projector-based augmented reality. They actually recreated, you know, basically a model of Buddha and actually projected it on the site, creating an opportunity to actually see the statue in a way that has never been seen before or never even imagined. And then another project, and this one is one of my projects from my master thesis, is a proof of concept that I developed for the ancient site of Erbil Citadel in Erbil, the capital of Kurdistan region of Iraq. So basically this site is, it's now in the tentative list of UNESCO to be, you know, it's just they are doing more documentation to add it to become a UNESCO site. It is known as the world's continuously inhabited settlement, and some even say city around the world. It dates back to 6000 BC. And, you know, some of the famous, you might have heard about the name from Gaugamela battle, like between Alexander the Great and the King Darius in there. So it took place actually near this city. But interestingly, this site is, you know, when you see it, the appearance of it, and just speaking back, like, you know, connecting back to the iceberg metaphor that I use, is actually you see just like the structures that you see now dates back to a couple hundred years ago. It's just because this site, the nature of this site, it has been, you know, built on successive layers of civilization. So the more valuable, the more older layers are beneath, and the ones that are top are actually dating just a couple hundred years ago. But the site is very old and ancient. Like I said, it's known, and it's used very often as an example for sustainability. So by using, you know, this using augmented reality technology to actually help with changing this misperception about the citadel. It's called Erbil Citadel. So this is what I did. Like I said, this is Erbil Citadel today. So this is how it is located in the heart of Erbil city. Like I said, these are all layers of successive layers of different civilizations that inhabited the city. And through using augmented reality, geolocation in augmented reality, mobile AR, in this proof of concept, what you see is actually it enables you to actually go around the site and actually virtually reconstruct the parts that have been demolished or destroyed. So basically, and this is a non-invasive way, because, you don't come up with people who say, oh, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that for the restoration part, but then you are just recreating it virtually and enable people to actually see the complete picture there. So this is one example of how you can do this. And then another project that I like to talk about, which is, it's not in endangered context in that sense in the Middle East, but it is still about cultural heritage that are endangered because of other reasons from natural disasters. So City View AR is a project that I had the honor of being involved with back in 2000, I'm trying to remember, 12, like 11, 12, during my PhD, as I was doing my PhD. And it is from HitLab, New Zealand. And so basically City View AR was developed to respond to a need. I don't know if you have heard about the city of Christchurch that was hit by a massive earthquake. And as a result of that, many of the heritage buildings were damaged in the city center. So the whole city center were actually locked down. And they had to clean up and many things. And many of the buildings that got damaged really badly were the heritage building. But thankfully, because of, they had taken pictures with an architecture firm in advance before, because when, earthquakes started more, so they started to realize more damage might happen. So they started to take pictures of the building and they recreated in 3D model. And what I was doing is actually optimizing the 3D model and also making this an AR experience in City View AR. Basically, it was allowing making the street, which is called Cashel Street, in the city center of Christchurch, to make it as an open museum. But how? By actually recreating, like using the reconstructed models there and geotagging them through the AR application there in their location. So basically, if you are going to the city, you say, oh, this is how it used to be. So all what you need is to hold your phone, and then the GPS recognizes that's where you are located, and it shows the building model in life size that used to be in that location. And the ambitions, I left them because I had to come back for doing my PhD, but the ambition is actually to develop it further, to use it as a tool for planners, for when they redevelop new buildings, and also helping with people to give feedback, making it like a participatory planning process where people say, oh, I like this design, I don't like this one, I like this color, I don't like this. So as a way of getting feedback. And aside from visualizing the 3D model, it was actually allowing you to tap on it and then read about the history of this building in audio and text-based things. And another project that actually, this is one of the early examples for using AR, and maybe Maria knows who are would Maria also be involved with these people?
No, but it was a thing in Greece.
Yes, I know, yeah. So this is one of the very early use of augmented reality technology in cultural heritage sites, and this is called ArcheoGuide. So basically, through using, AR glasses, it was, and at the time, the technology has not evolved, because this one is about like early 2000. That's when they developed this project as a first prototype. And, you had to carry a laptop, basically. It was like that. But now the technology has advanced more. So it had allowed people to go around the ancient site of Olympia and actually see some of the buildings reconstructed and seeing in life size, basically as if you are here. So basically, this is a user. If they go around, and this is what they see, the building actually on the site. And here is like, a comparison between how Philippian temple, how it looks like. Like this is what you see with your naked eyes, and this is what you see with the glass. And then not very far from home here at the British Museum, there was this project called the Bronze Age Roundhouse. And this is that, it shows, they recreated a house from the Bronze Age and allowing, using VR technology, allowing people to go inside this tent, like this cave, and, see, navigate through it as if you are actually visiting the home. So it's a 3D reconstruction, but also you could go inside it, more immersive. And then another opportunity that comes with using technologies is actually virtual restoration, but off-site visualization. How that means you don't need to be on the side, but things like that. Again, going back to the Christchurch case, you know, when I was working there, I said, well, there is an opportunity with using this one. You know, people go somewhere and sometimes they like to take a souvenir from somewhere. So why not taking a 3D model of actually Christchurch Cathedral? So here you have, you know, this is unfortunately after this there was another earthquake. They have to, I think, end up with demolishing the cathedral, which was the iconic building in the city center of Christchurch, and it was endangered, not because of terrorism, but unfortunately because of natural reasons. So here, you know, by using just a, you know, just a picture of like a satellite view of the area, and it could be basically any other picture, by the way. It was like, you know, and I used Junaio for that. Here you see the 3D model that we have actually tagged, augmented on that piece of paper. And of course, in architecture, we use this a lot for, you know, visualizing 3D model. We used to create models, like, you know, those kind of scale model that people see. Well, this one make it even easier because all what you need is just put on your glasses. You can interact with it even more than just looking around and sometimes going inside and even making it as if you are actually inside the building. So I mean, this is one of the way you can actually bring the 3D reconstruction into life again, you know, through, you know, a piece of paper or a postcard. And in fact, we had a postcard. I didn't include that example with a postcard of the project. What we did is actually tag like the video, the promotion of the project on it. So basically, and IKEA did that later. It was, you know, their catalog. They had, for example, one of the drawers. So here you see the drawer locked. But then if you had that AR on it, then you would have been able to open the drawer and see even more inside it. So basically, you know, augmenting extra stuff that otherwise you won't be able to see. So this is an interesting way for showing, you know, like I said, engaging with cultural heritage. And here these are the 3D laser scan objects my supervisor did with his colleague. And, you know, these were for First Nation people in Canada, who they thought it's sacred things that people should not touch. So how can you, if you want to interact with this, one of the interesting ways was actually when you have a virtual replica of it, then actually there is possible with technologies like AR to bring them back. How with, you know, with using these AR glasses called physics, and there are of course more advanced ones now. So here you see, here I'm, you know, playing as if I'm holding actually the artifacts on my hand. And of course this could be used for just for the sake of, you know, education or even researching purposes. Especially, like I said, for these artifacts, there was this thing from the First Nation people that people are not supposed to touch these things for us. And another opportunity that comes with technology is for geotagging and delivering contextual information. So here you see in the case of Erbil Citadel, the proof of concept again. Here you see if you go around and if you have by the gate, and if you hold the phone, so you see, you know, a hotspot that tells you there is something going on. And once you tap it, then archival photos from that era, from like, you know, old times, show up on the live screen. So basically telling you this is how it used to look like. And of course, there are also this other way of geotagging information where if you are moving around, you see these different hotspots. If you tap on them, it tells you this is this. It tells you about different elements and different components of the Erbil Citadel, basically to inform and to tell you more about the history of the citadel. And of course, this concept of geotagging archival photo was actually inspired by London Street Museum. This is an application from the Museum of London. So what they did is actually, they said, well, we have a lot of archival photos that are buried in our archives, no one is looking at them. So how can we bring them out, right? So they actually, through this application, it enabled people to go to different part of the city, and they see these like basically hotspot or points where they, if they tap on it and hold the phone, then it's like they see the archival photo from a different era. So if they remove the phone, here is the present moment. If they bring back the phone, then through the phone screen, they see the old time. Basically, you know, seeing different, it's like a time machine in that sense. And then another thing, more interesting, you know, uses of technology with cultural heritage, it's actually to bringing life into collections, like making them interactive. And this is something from my PhD that, you know, it's part, like, you know, as part of my PhD, I designed, co-developed, and evaluated this mobile augmented reality application called Heritage Park Portal. Heritage Park is in Canada. It's known as the largest outdoor museum in North America, and it is, it's like basically composed, it's like a park, and it has the old building from Western Canada, like how they, how it was developed. And, some of the buildings are the original one. They brought them there. Some are replica. So, and they recreated what's called historical village. And people, the program in that museum is mostly relying on first-person interpretation, where people in human guide in costume, they play a role or they tell about the people and the characters in that. And just to reinforce this, this living history museum theme of the museum, and also to address their need to actually add interpretation for their exhibits that no one exists in them. Why? Because of logistical reasons. Part of it is because of lack of fund and things like that. So, by working with them closely, we came up with things like this. So what you see here is actually part of a classroom. So this is a classroom, like, they had a school, one-room school at the time, where there was some interesting stories about how even the configuration of the space, and that kids from all ages were actually studying in one room. So we wanted to tell this story in an interesting way. So, this is part of the classroom. At that point, the technology was allowing to actually augment things based on the actual view, so not installing QR code or anything extra. So this is me holding the phone just against the part of classroom. Of course, this was like a pervasive game. So basically, there are audio clues that first tell you, go find a target from describing how a building looked like. And then once you are there, it tell you, go scan this part of the classroom or scan this object or something. And then once you are doing this, this is what you would have seen. This is a Heritage Park actor, again, one of the human guide interpreters, who showed up on the, there and tell you about the story. And the way she acts is like, you are one person from that time. So I will just play you somehow. Is this audio working here? Because I wanted to show you how. And of course, I was like, using chroma keying, things that mean with green screen, and removing the green screen and showing here up there. So this is how it is. So basically here you see, it tell you find and point your camera at the target. And of course, this is after hearing the audio clue that tell you to go to the school and find it. And this is what.
I'm the teacher here. Let's see, you're new to the area, are you not? Well, I know you'll be busy with planting and harvesting and whatnot, but I cannot.
So this is basically the school teacher telling a local to bring his children to the school to enroll them, But basically, like I said, the interpretation is more like, through telling something in a way that this person is talking to you. And of course, Heritage Park people, interpreters, have played a big role in this one. Now I am, with working with Emotive, I realized, I appreciate, at the time I thought, okay, yes, this is a story, and now I realize how important that aspect and how time-consuming and how you have to be very critical and very bright to come up with a, with a interesting story that actually catch people. Because otherwise it will be hard, And from museum point, like from technology use point of view, you don't need to for people to hold their mobile for a long time. So you have to think fast. You have to make sure that this is interesting enough for a short time that make people want to even use the application. And then another, in the same application, another thing in another building, another target, I had used this technique where you have this archival photo on the wall. And this is coming, by the way, before this study, because in this study I had two parts. One of them was using augmented reality for navigation and another for storytelling. So I did the navigation study where I had user study and things like that. And when I worked with them, one of the things was coming up, I was like, aside from their navigation experience, I wanted to get feedback about what they thought about the exhibit and what engaged them, so that I use those information in designing the storyteller. So one thing that was consistently coming up, people say, well, I saw a picture on the wall, I wish I knew who was that, or something like, this kind of thing. And that inspired this design, which is this. So basically here, this is it's not a stage photo, it's an archival photo on the wall of this family. So basically, the audio guide tell you, and this was, like I said, a pervasive game involving with solving a puzzle, so you have to go to different targets and meet different characters. And this one was telling you, go to this Thorpe house and find a picture on a wall and scan it. And this is what happens if you scan it. So here I'm just recreating. I have the photos, like the actual one, but here, just to get an idea. So if you hold, and I have it that you can use it.
Let's see. We request your presence. Oh dear. We request the pleasure of your We request the honor of your company. Oh, I'll never get this right. I need to get these invitations written out. Our parties are a lot of fun. Mom.
So basically, I have a demo that you can try. So basically, and to make this more sound like one of the characters coming to life and start speaking to you. By the way, this is a software that I use called Crazy Talk. It's for lip sync. So basically, I know it's funny because I was not pro, but if you could do it, I had sound actors recording them and then combining them in Adobe After Effects, and then it was sound like this was lip sync. The child was lip sync and then talking. And of course, because what I did is actually I removed, like this was a PNG file image. So what I did is actually become a alpha video, sorry. So that means these were not available, like the surrounding of the kill were not available on the actual AR experience. So it looked like them. I'm just bringing one of them to life, not the whole image. Because you could do that. But I mean, what was more interesting for people is this concept, one of them start to talk to me now. And like I said, I have the papers with me that you can try. So this one is another one at the hotel room, where this building had, the hotel itself had a very interesting story, where it was actually, apparently they built a railway in somewhere, so they had, and this guy has come up with an idea about moving the hotel to that location, new location, because the whole town moved. And with my supervisor, we were just trying to think about the logic, whether it would have taken less time to rebuild one or move this one, because he's telling about the story of how they end up moving this hotel. Because of the file size, I couldn't embed it here, but let me just show you quickly how that looked like. I don't think it's working. Yeah. Oh, okay. So maybe I will move to next, and then when it starts to playing, I will show you. And this is another project that it's called the Ultimate Dinosaur app. It's not my project, but I mean it's something interesting. Talks to that concept of how you create interactivity for collection and how to bring cultural heritage into life. And this has been done in a museum in Canada, where actually they have this big skeleton of the dinosaur. By holding your iPad or something, then you bring flesh back to it and animate the sculpt, like the skeleton there, as if the dinosaur is moving and things like that. And this is another project that I was involved in when I was doing my visiting scholarship in HitLab, and this is called Coral Archiving. So this was for an artist in Australia. She wanted to have this exhibition about corals that are endangered. She wanted to convey a message. So by using AR technology, this is what we use. So basically, they had created the animation themselves, but it was about showing the animation. So here first, this is just a replica, me trying to test this. So this is a black and white version. Of course, they had a more like bigger poster, but it could work on any. But to give you a concept, so you would first hold the phone against the poster. At first, a digital replica of the same thing show up. And then if you tap it, then the corals start to animate. You hear sound of water, and a turtle moves around, and then it moves even further. You see this thing. So basically, it gives the impression that you are actually animating the poster. And why this is, this was interesting, and the artist wanted to go there because it was augmenting extra information, things that you couldn't have shown, like the case of the IKEA cover. They didn't want to include too many, pictures of the same drawer, so instead they use an AR experience to augment the experience. And another use of, this is the last point I would like to make, is about using technology within the context of cultural heritage and including endangered. It's actually for crowdsourcing cultural heritage and public participation. You see, one of the problems for endangered context is that content, collection and content creation. This is something I'm right now in the research that I'm hoping to use the emotive platform for. I'm having problem with coming up with content. So through using technology, it is possible to create things like that, as if I suggested in ALU, Arbela Layers, and covered what I did for my master's, is actually creating a database for people to input, whether it's their stories, whether it's images or things like that about different cultural heritage, in this case about Erbil Citadel. But I mean this, and this concept was inspired by others. They do, I think it was a municipality project by London, something about, telling the municipality about garbage that are located in different parts of the city. So they were trying to crowdsource. Basically, people say, well, I have just seen some garbage here that has not been collected, or this kind of thing. So then collecting that and making municipality go to places that they might have otherwise visited at a later time. So what I'm trying to say is, inspired by this concept, I said, well, there are opportunities for collecting data about the sites, and especially in cases like Mosul. For example, now I am working with Rashid, that's an NGO, working about cultural heritage, endangered cultural heritage in Iraq. So we were trying to write a report about Mosul. We couldn't even get an image of some of the sites that has been destructed. But I mean, through an application like that, you really enable locals to input pictures, text, anything they have about a cultural heritage site. Then it is an interesting way to actually at least crowdsource and generate content. And this would be also a nice way for a public engagement, because through taking photos, people are, I'm taking a photo of something that I'm caring for, and it's an interesting way for engaging with cultural heritage. And in conclusion, I would like to say, digital technology, like I said, as a mean, not as a end goal, really opened doors for new opportunities for cultural heritage, especially in those endangered areas, in a way that it provides new ways for heritage preservation and revival. And one thing I think that digital technologies is doing really nicely is that it really helps with this transformation from not only physical preservation, just maintaining the objects, preserving the physicality of it, but also, making this transformation to actually enliven cultural heritage. Like I said, through these examples, making them interactive, making engaging people, those things, making them, enlivening them and reviving them in ways that has never been seen before. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Rozhen. I think it was really, from a tour around the world of some of the possibilities, it was very useful. It will be useful to open it to questions or any comments you might have. Was there anybody else anybody who wanted to ask Rozhen something or make a comment? Yep.
Thank you for this nice presentation. I was wondering if, for example, the city view AR technology is also open for other projects to use, because those kind of applications who bring historical pictures back in the city, also for city planning processes, could be super useful for many people, many different people. So it would be nice to see if there's also some kind of open culture movement that comes together with those technologies that can be used in so many different ways.
Well, thank you very much, Francisca, for raising that, because I think that's what Emotive is doing brilliantly in that sense. And it's that touching on that need on cultural heritage, because even for myself, who was involved in such a big scale, AR development, when I went back home and I wanted to do something for them, well, I felt like, I am tied. Why? Because I needed, programming skills. I had some, but not even, something that I could develop my own independently. So for part of the heritage part of it, I had to hire a programmer. Now I am back in Iraq. I don't have the same access, the same thing that I had in Canada. So, for a while I had been away. But I mean, moving from one project, one digital technology project, one thing, to a platform or something that is enable others to use. It's like a reusable thing. It is, like you mentioned, it creates this, movement of cultural heritage, open cultural heritage. It helps, first of all, to achieve what you are doing, preserving on a large scales and engagement, and also, it will be used for those side and thing. So I know City View AR, they were also hoping to make it as a platform, but I don't think they moved far because they have other projects, in progress. But I think that's what Emotive is doing is making a platform for others to use at least, and that's why I'm here, is trying to hopefully use this one as a case for Kurdistan region, and then from there for the rest of Iraq, and hopefully that will inspire others to use it, so that, it becomes basically like a YouTube of cultural heritage, presentation or something, I mean, at least even if it's just collecting things, if it is just like, people make it as a source for at least, as a database for collecting assets and things like that, it will be still an interesting thing. And then allowing other people use it, because I think Sketchfab is doing something like that, they said.
That's very useful because Francesca just started her PhD here with crowdsourcing in cultural heritage, and we're trying to work with the Hunterian collections, trying in the next few steps to decide which one of those and can we bring communities in through the digital to engage with our collections. Was there any other question or comment? I bamboozled you a bit. This was very useful, Rozhen, but I think, well, if I may ask the question as well, you were very complimentary and made a lot of nice remarks about emotive, but that and other projects are not without, as you know, challenges and problems as well. I think you showed really nicely how it can bring a lot of different communities and disciplines together. Do you mind telling us, elaborating a little bit more on the difficulties and the challenges of doing projects like this?
Yeah. So one of the problems is, first of all, it starts with technical skill and then cultural heritage awareness. So it's a combination of two. So on one side, you have a community who, and I would say it's a vicious cycle. So the minute they start to, even if they take a photo of it, it's like look like something they are starting to develop some, some attachment with it. So by just having them, just take a photo, reuse it later on, it's kind of the first step to, crowdsource the information, and then from there, at least enabling other people to use this. So one of the challenges for me as a researcher and for others is actually, like I said, lack of skilled people who first of all understand. One of my challenges is actually people even understanding why this is important. But I'm sure there is a push and pull component of it. That's something in marketing says. Sometimes people might not know what they need, but when you have it and when you give them, oh, this is an interesting thing. So in that case, you would use the push strategy, basically. It's just that, and they say this is actually, once I learned about this in a workshop in business, they say, sometimes, let's say if you have a business, you want to develop a product, there is this two strategy. One of them, you look at the market and develop for needs. Based on the needs, you pull. You say, this is the need, so I need to combine all, and I am developing a service or a product that respond to these needs. But there is also a push strategy. None of us knew about Facebook. None of us even thought we will use Facebook, right? Yet it has been developed, and then we started to use it. So basically, they pushed it on us, something like that. That's how they use the analogy. So I mean, sometimes I think it's just a matter of showing people, entertaining people, educating people about cultural heritage in an interesting way, and then from there, the ball rolls, and you will involve more. But like I said, again, the challenge is the lack of that technical skill or even appreciation to start this thing. And so one thing that I'm hoping to do with this project is actually showing a few examples, even if they are not perfect, is just recently one of my students used it for his project using an AR thing. And again, this is not the end goal, but the way of the presentation. Because we use it in architecture to also, tell about the boards and the thing that we have, like the floor plan and thing like that. So the time they had an annual exhibition, and he wanted to do something interesting. I said, well, we are running out of time to recreate the model in virtual and then showing that on something in an AR way. Let's go for a chroma key, the same thing as I hope that if the video shows how it works on you have a character showing up on something in the background, like the lady in the room, but this one is on a image. So he used that. It's what interested me is this. I have been using this technology for the last, since 2007 when I started my master's, and I've been researching and doing this thing. But I have been talking about it back home, giving lectures and seminars about it, but it never had this effect that when they saw one of my students actually using it there. So they say, oh, we use it as if it's a transferable thing for us too. We can do it too. You know what I mean? So I mean, sometimes doing it as an example will be really helpful, that they connect to, different way of interpretation, and then from there, other people come up with more creative ideas on doing this.
Thank you. Was there any other comment or question? Yeah, Luca.
Just thinking if you have found, or you have thought about, or you have seen somewhere, maybe if you thought about the problem of showing things a bit maybe politically incorrect, or in places where you have certain regimes that you cannot say, okay, show how really things were, or
Well, thank you very much. Actually, I think that's one of the challenges I will eventually run into. It's something that we didn't have, we didn't have interpretation and cultural heritage, storytelling, thing like that. But then I'm sure when we start, developing, telling content about things, telling stories, then we will run into multiple views, different people see things, and this is what I'm hoping to actually research, how different people perceive the very same, content that has been delivered. But then if you don't have the medium, then it will be impossible to even test it, and this is what I'm hoping at least to start with the medium, and then from there collecting data about the impact of this thing. But thank you very much. That's actually very interesting thing, which I'm sure in a multi-ethnicity country like Iraq we will run into. But it will be interesting to see how, first of all, it show up, and then ways of why they show up, and do more research. But at the moment, I haven't had such experience.
Hopefully you'll persevere and you won't let it happen. Was there any other comment, Hilary?
This might be a tricky question, but just in terms of, you might not have thought this far ahead in terms of what the project to do with crowdsourcing how it will look. But I'm just intrigued, the first couple of slides you were showing in terms of the peopling of the museums. There's very few people in those images that you showed. So how do you make the link between that to then trying to encourage people to participate in the crowdsourcing? What is the actual, what could you do to actually make people participate in the crowdsourcing? Because that's what we found was really hard, and when I worked at the Museum of London, was to actually engage people who had perhaps the knowledge and the stories that we wanted to access, but were not interested in the least in using our crowdsourcing tools.
That's a very interesting point. I will share with you a comparison between two things. So one time there was this researcher telling me about the context of Lebanon, that people are having survey fatigue. Basically, they have been surveyed too many times. When people do research, they collect that, they have, it's a survey. In Iraq context, the whole concept of surveying with people, researching thing is new. So and I have seen it. You would be surprised if you tell a community to come up for something. You would be surprised how crowded it gets. So it looked like at least we can start with some potential in that sense. People are willing to share at the moment. So if you say, let's say, and we have had things like that. We're saying, can you, give us a feedback on something? And we would have been bombarded by feedback. And in fact, in classes, and I'm saying this, and this is not a joke. It happened in class. In Canada, I was taking workshop on, teaching in classrooms about how to make a classroom interactive. You have to, encourage students to ask questions and things like that. Because, when you try there, sometimes people don't ask, you want to involve them. Back home in the classroom, I even don't dare sometimes to open it because it won't end. There are too many questions pop up. You know what I mean? So it looked like at least the population, at least from what I'm sensing, in a state that they are ready. They have not experienced the fatigue yet that, for example, what happened in Lebanon. But it looked like, you see from what I'm seeing, they are open for this idea of, sharing things. And another thing that makes me think that they will be willing to participate is just that people there started, and I was telling to Carolina yesterday, or you, Maria, about the mall, going to malls.
Yes.
So some of the malls that people go to these days, concept of malls are new back home. Most of, historically we didn't have malls. We had, flea markets and different kind of, shops, individual shops, but not malls. Nowadays, malls are, getting very crowded at night. Family goes out, and some of the activities that you see being packed are, the concept of an artist opening something somewhere is very new, and everyone goes and take pictures with. Or, something that an artist might struggle with somewhere else. Or even, we have these visualization VR thing, they call it, one of the shops, they really exaggerated, went to say 9D experience. Not 4D, 9D experience. I don't know where they got the other 5Ds. But and people love it, and it is very crowded. You have to wait, for hours sometimes just to get into the thing. So I'm saying, if you make that a message related to a cultural heritage or something, there are potential. And this is something that I hope. If I go to the mall and I expose them to some of these interesting experiences related to cultural heritage and to measure whether they will come to the museum or not. And like I said, because museum environment itself is not healthy, there are no programs, there are nothing, no engagement. So it would be interesting, like I said, for me, it's a big question, and I am exploring, seeing. But there are, silver lining, or at least indicators that look like people will be willing to at least crowdsource?
Thank you.
I just think it's really interesting because it sounds like your idea that crowdsourcing is a really social aspect
Yes.
of it, as opposed to what we did was actually like all online and all on digital. And I think that's the difference. And I think possibly there's lots of potential and success for the model that you're talking about in terms of thinking about it as being a social aspect to gathering information and stories about objects that are important to people. And I think that's really quite exciting.
And on that, you see, Hilary, on that thing, I was in a conference in ACM Multimedia back in 2000, I think it was 12. So there was this gentleman was telling us, he was from Yahoo, telling us about how different countries use social media differently and how, collective culture versus individualism are showing up in using the technology. So he was saying, in Malaysia, for example, if someone likes someone's image, then you immediately see this person is liking the image back. So he said, it's just like, showing up, it's just the social aspect of it showing up on the, the use of the technology. And I think, like I said, I am having hard time, telling my students, that's it, you have a lecture that we need to go through all these other things. While in North America, for example, we were having this challenge about involving students, making them ask questions, otherwise they are all silent.
Was there any other comment or question? Yes.
Thank you for your presentation, and that really reminds me of the days where I worked with some of the cultural heritage workers in Western Africa, and I think in West Africa they have also face some difficulties because they are very rich in cultural heritage, and among like 16 countries in that region, most of the countries have only like one World Heritage Site certificate by UNESCO, and that's not a coincidence because actually none of the sites meets the standard of UNESCO. They just get one site for each country just to encourage them to preserve their cultural heritage. So I was wondering, do you have any suggestions or advice for those countries rich in cultural heritage but they are relatively poor? They don't have the money to build museums. They don't even know what virtual reality classes are. And do we have any other measures to protect?
Well, thank you very much. I didn't know about actually Africa's case. That's an interesting thing because believe it or not, in Iraq, and now I'm thinking we have now a site that has been entered UNESCO list, and it looked like they were also giving us an advantage. It looked like because recently they were warning from UNESCO. They said if you don't, and it was about the marshland actually, they said if you don't comply with what we agreed on, then we have to remove it again. So I mean we do have these challenges of cultural heritage management, and I would say a couple things on that. So if I would compare, if that's similar, then I would expect, because in the context of Iraq this is true, first of all, we don't have programs that are specific for museum and cultural heritage management. So the only program that we have, and the only people who make it to museums are, two groups, archaeologists and architects. And even an architect, as an architect, I have never taken courses in cultural heritage. It was through my master's and PhD in Canada that I, got into this field. For archaeologists, they take a course, but that's in the third year, and it's a half course. And it's, just about the basics of museum. So if you basically don't have people who even understand, what is labeling. Recently Paul actually, he was giving a workshop, Paul Collins, he's a curator at Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. He was giving, because Nahrain have these programs, they want to encourage, promote cultural heritage in Iraq and do research, and that's why I'm on this visiting scholarship. He said, the very basic knowledge about labeling in museums was not available. You know what I mean? So, there is an English saying, and we have equivalent of it in Kurdish that says, you cannot give what you don't have, right? So the very basic of knowledge, understanding about how the practice is happening is not available. And then, from that comes whether you have an outdated information or you are new. So I would say that first it starts with the schools. And there is another thing that I really noticed this. In fact, in another talk that I had, I was showing a picture of myself and my sister in the British Museum. I was like, in the British Museum, my first visit, how I was involved with an audio guide and, trying to see the Rosetta Stone and everything. And just a couple meters away from me, my sister was sitting just with her phone, completely not even, not even bothered by whatever is around here. I was just showing an example about how different people see cultural heritage, how they are engaged. And I would say part of it is that the museum is, appreciation of cultural heritage is not in people, in locals, day-to-day, values and stuff. It's because many people go to museum. As a child, I have never been taken to a museum. It's funny that when I come outside, and my family are very educated people, and the same thing for the whole city. In fact, I'm planning to run a survey on the scale of the city to know how many people have they been to the museum and whether they go to museums abroad. Because when I go to anywhere, if I don't go to a museum, it looks like I have not been to the museum. But then when I'm not going to the local museum, there is this thing that sometimes when you are living somewhere, you would say, well, I will go someday, but you never do it. But I mean, it is. So I mean, but it is still like, people, but when I go to Erbil, I don't go to the museum either. So I mean, there are things to be explored. So I would say, trying from education program at the schools, trying to teach about history through museums. And this is what the UNESCO encouraged with this new exhibit. This is one thing. And then, developing skills, like training people for being, working in museum, preparing them. These are very two common sense things, and yet it is not available. And then, at least when new ideas come to these people, then they catch it. But now, one of the struggles that I have now working with the museum is that, there is no appreciation, no understanding. It's like we are speaking two different languages. Their idea for museum is about how to protect it. In fact, Sulaimani Museum has a door that looks like a safe box. Seriously, it's like a safe box that you open it and then you go inside. So you know what I mean? And that should tell you about the idea of how, because cultural heritage is about just you are protecting these objects and showing them, just like the old way of seeing museums.
It's a very interesting comment you made also for our museum study students, because it's not, people don't go in Kurdistan to museums because they also feel they don't have things there for them. And the way you were describing with the malls and other ways that life is changing very fast. It would be important to try to go to the community, not just expect people to go to the museum, just assuming that it has things for them. It's food for thought, though, there, I think. Was there any other question or comment? Yes, at the back.
On the subject of old ways of doing things and old ways of thinking, how would you respond to the criticism that digital technologies threaten not just to enhance perception of objects or places, but to, in some ways, replace them? If you have a video on your phone, then why not watch it on your computer and never visit the site?
Well, that's interesting. Like you mentioned, there is this criticism always remains that with this discussion comes. And my response for that is always, this could be an alternative, first of all. It's never, in fact, my research show, like with AR, and because it's called augmented reality, the name helps me even come up with this interesting way of saying. I say it's best used when it is augmented reality, not replacing reality. And my research showed that whenever it is like, and other people's research show actually, if you try to replace it, then you don't get the success. But then, let's say if you are coming, first of all, I don't think there are research that show whether this has been, I don't know, Maria, if you know of any, if technology were trying to see whether the long impact of a technology, where they were detracting from the sites or not. But let's say there will be eventually. I would say there was a paper I was coming across called Museum in 21st Century. It was talking about this challenge of museum with funding, trying to, people's time getting tighter and tighter, yet too many options are available for people from cinema and things like that they could go and use their spare time with. It was saying, well, we are not saying Disneyfy museums, but there should be a way of, for cultural heritage institution to step up for the needs of the technophile people who otherwise, okay, well then you might, which one is worse? Whether you replace it and they at least they still have some interaction with it, or they just don't interact with it at all, you know what I mean? Because they did a study in, I think someone was telling me this, I haven't read the paper myself, said they did, what was it for, in a museum in Ottawa, they took children for the museum and they were not interactivity, so they got bored, they didn't involve, they used to, touch things, interactive things, but now, they got bored and they never wanted to explore anything. So in that moment, then you are losing a generation, or at least a population of people who you could have otherwise worked. But then again, my point is not to, because at least my research shows that it's not a good idea to replace, to try to replace. It's the best work, technology is working the best when you are actually augmenting, than not, like, the things that, or the experience or something.
It's interesting. When Adam first started his question, I thought he was going to say how new technologies can sometimes do very old and traditional interpretation within it, which I find is another problem, which is why it was very interesting, because it's a tool, it's a medium, as you said. It doesn't change necessarily people's perception just automatically, and sometimes we do very old things with new tools, fancy, impressive tools. So it was nice to see also like the emphasis on storytelling or engaging people and getting them to co-produce and co-design, because you'll never get it necessarily right and what is right, but communicating and doing it together with others, I think, has better chances. Was there any other comment or question? No? I just wanted to finish by saying publicly that it's really nice for us, and both for the Motive at a critical stage when we have a year left and we are kind of very open to have fresh ideas and a critique, also for the Hunterian, where we're thinking about the remaining parts of the Kelvin Hall, not the one where we're here, but the part that's closed, that wants to open up in partnership with Glasgow museums and National Library and rethink ways of exhibiting and displaying and opening up to communities, as well as information studies of how do we take all of this and integrate it in our teaching and open up in our minds, where we use a lot of local Scottish Glasgow museums as examples, but we're very keen to keep an international approach. It's very nice to have Rozhen and people like her, because, and also you can see, I think, the enthusiasm and the commitment coming out of her to give us back a little bit of our own energy and make us rethink and reflect some of these things. So thank you very much, and thank you also for coming and joining in the conversation.